I'm going to show you how to assemble from start to finish a full-fledged computer for under 75 bucks that you can use for web browsing, playing games, word processing, emailing, and even computer programming using Java, Python, Scratch, and other programming languages. At the center of this economy dream machine is the Raspberry Pi 3 running the Raspbian operating system with its new desktop environment called Pixel. Here's what you need in order to assemble this computer. First, you need a Raspberry Pi 3. Make certain that you have the most recent version so that you have sufficient CPU power to run a full desktop computer. The Raspberry Pi 3 costs about $35. Second, I assume you have either a monitor or at least a television set that you can hook up to your Raspberry Pi 3. If you don't have one, worst case scenario, you can buy a new monitor for about $100. Third, if you don't have one available already, you will need to pick up an HDMI cable. That's to connect the Raspberry Pi to your monitor or TV. They cost about $6. Next, you need a keyboard and mouse. I'm using a wireless keyboard and mouse, but you could use wired versions as well. A new wireless keyboard and mouse costs about $19. You'll also need a 5-volt power supply. Make certain that the plug is compatible with the Raspberry Pi. The cost of a 5-volt power supply is $6. And finally, you need a micro SD card of at least 8 gigabytes. The cost of a 16 gigabyte class 10 micro SD card is about $8. You actually can get one that already has the operating system installed on it for a little bit extra money. And that might be a good investment if you don't want to go through the process of formatting an SD card and installing the operating system yourself. Although I'm going to show you how to do that step by step in this video. Raspberry Pi 3 is the third generation of Raspberry Pi. It replaced the Raspberry Pi 2 Model B earlier this year. And compared to the Raspberry Pi 2, it has both wireless LAN and Bluetooth. So let's take a look at it. It comes in a electrostatic cling envelope and has some instructions, a safety guide, and a quick start guide. We'll talk about those a little bit later. Here's the Raspberry Pi itself, and it's very similar to the Raspberry Pi 2. In fact, it has the same footprint, so that if you have a case for your Raspberry Pi 2, this would fit in it nicely. Just like the Raspberry Pi 2, it has 4 USB ports, has an Ethernet port, it has an audio output and HDMI, and this is a power cord outlet. It has an SD card reader, a little bit different from the Raspberry Pi 2. Instead of having a push in and push out, you just push it in and you pull out the SD card, and we'll show that a little bit later as well. And on the bottom is the wireless LAN and Bluetooth connection card. A couple differences. Well, I guess similar to the same. It has a gigabyte of RAM. It also has 40 GPIO, general purpose input output pins. In addition, the full HDMI port there is unlike the original Raspberry Pi. It doesn't have any RCA connection. The big change is, instead of the old processor now, it has a 1.2 gigahertz 64-bit quad-core ARM v8 CPU. So that's quite a bit of power in such a small and inexpensive device. If you bought a micro SD card with Noobs, the new out-of-the-box software pre-installed, you can skip these steps and go right to connecting the hardware. If not, I will show you how to format your micro SD card and install an operating system. Raspberry Pi recommends that you use at least an 8 gigabyte class 4 SD card. I'm using a 16 gigabyte, gives me a little bit more space for additional materials, plus a 10 class SD card. The main difference between a 4 class SD card and a 10 class is the speed by which it transfers data. If your computer doesn't have a built-in SD card, you can buy or borrow one. This is an example. You put your SD card in here and it has a USB plug that plugs into your computer. And of course, if you can't borrow one, it doesn't really make sense to buy one. I'd just get the pre-formatted SD card as we've explained before and go from there. To get the SD card formatting tool, go to sdcard.org on your web browser, click on Downloads, select the card formatter that's correct for your system. I'm using Windows. Scroll through the license agreement and click Accept. Decide where you want to download the file. I'm going to download it into my Downloads folder. Save it. Take a couple of seconds to download. Once it's downloaded, click Open, and then click the setup.exe file. It'll bring up the Install Shield wizard. Once it shows, click Next. Click Next again, and it will install. Allow it to make changes to your app if you're using Windows or to your device. And once it's completed, click Finish. And SD formatter will show up on your desktop for use. With your SD card inserted in your computer, open the SD formatter tool. Go to Options, click Format Type, make it full, and Format Size Adjustment, turn it to On. Click OK. Click the Format button, click OK again, and in a few seconds your card will be formatted. Now that we've formatted the SD card, we can load it with operating system. In order to do that, go to raspberrypi.org, click on Downloads, and go to Noobs, which is the new out-of-the-box software for installing operating systems. And then I'm going to use the Noobs network install, which includes Raspbian as part of the download. That'll save us some time when we're downloading later. It also allows you to pick a number of alternative operating systems at the time that you do the installation. Unless you're very familiar with torrent, do not use torrent. Go to the download zip file. Click Save As. Put it in the folder that you want to use. I'm going to put it into the download folder. Click Save. And let it download. This is going to take quite a bit of time, so I will come back as the download is complete and talk about next steps. Alright, we have just a few more seconds to go in the download process, and then we'll be ready to move the operating system over to our SD card. And now it's complete, so I will open the folder and we'll close the web browser, and I'm going to open up also the file with the SD card. It's E for me. Now come over and on Noobs, need to extract the file, so I right clicked the Noob zip file, click Extract All, click Extract, and it will go into the same downloads folder but in a new file that is unzipped. So that just takes a few seconds, and as soon as it is done, I will go to that file, which is now Noobs version 2.0, highlight everything that is in that file, and copy it over onto my SD card. And that's quite a bit of data, so that will take a while as well, and I'll come back as soon as that is complete. Now that the transfer of the SD card is complete, we're ready to put our SD card into our Raspberry Pi, and then we can connect the rest of the hardware so that we have a full desktop computer. Let's talk quickly about how to set up the rest of the hardware connections on this device. You'll need an SD card, and that SD card holds your operating system as well as any programming and other items that you add into the memory, and it slides into the slot right here. I'm using a wireless keyboard and mouse, so I have a dongle for it, and I've just plugged it into any of the USB ports.
We also need to hook in a monitor, and there's an HDMI slot for that. You can use either an HDMI compatible monitor, or you can get an adapter, or you can connect it to your television to use as a monitor, and it plugs in there. And then power cord goes in to this little slot and plugs into the wall. And then finally, if you need it,
there's also an Ethernet port, and I've got an Ethernet cable here. And because the Raspberry Pi includes wireless LAN, you don't even need an Ethernet cable if you're going to connect this to your Wi-Fi in order to connect to the internet.
Even for the setup, which is different from previous versions of the Raspberry Pi. But with that hooked up, you should have all the audio you need. If you want to use headphones, earpods, you can plug them into this outlet as well. It also has inputs for using a camera and for other sensors. Now that we have our hardware connected, we can plug the power supply into the wall and run through the startup process to complete our setup.
Once we get past the splash screen and the loading steps, the first thing that will come up on the noob screen is the Raspbian operating system installation option, because Raspbian was included when we installed noobs on the SD card. Raspbian is a version of Linux built specifically for Raspberry Pi and the recommended operating system for this desktop PC assembly. But to show you some of the other operating systems available, I'm going to log on to my Wi-Fi. Once I'm connected, I'll see several other operating systems available. Some of the other options currently available include Localization 2, which is for gamers who want to play retro video games on a game console emulator, or if you want to use your Raspberry Pi primarily to watch videos and play music. Two good options are OSMC, the Open Source Media Center, which is a full-blown feature-rich media center platform, or the more bare-bones but speedier Libre Embedded Linux Entertainment Center, LibreELEC. Windows IoT Core is not a Windows desktop environment, but instead is a development environment for coders who want to prototype internet-connected devices using the Raspberry Pi. But as I said, for purposes of creating a desktop, you should install the Raspbian operating system. I'm therefore going to check the box next to Raspbian, then click Install, and then click Yes to confirm my selection. It will take a few minutes for Raspbian to install, so I'll pause here. When our installation is complete, we'll get a message box stating that it was installed successfully. Once we click OK, it will run through a brief startup process, and then our desktop will appear. The first thing we'll want to do is log back into our wireless network. So I'll click the icon in the upper right-hand corner of my screen, select my Wi-Fi network, and enter my password. After a second or two, you will be connected to your Wi-Fi and ready to move on to the remainder of the setup process. The next step in the setup is to update our file systems. You should actually redo this process every month or two to keep your desktop up to date. We'll update our system by opening the LX terminal and executing two commands. The first command is sudo apt-get update. This will update our system's package list. This will take a few moments, so I'll speed up the video as the system fetches and reads the package list. Once that is complete, we are now ready to enter our next command, which is sudo apt-get dist-upgrade. Click enter. And then after reading the package list, the system will provide a prompt asking whether you want to continue. Type Y and the update will begin. This will take quite a few minutes. I'll pause recording here and come back when that is complete. Once the system has fetched all the upgrade packages, you will need to hit Q for quit and the packages will be unpacked and installed. You may be asked to enter OK or type Y to accept changes along the way, and you should do so. I'll speed up the video here to save some time. Now that the system is updated, you can remove the downloaded package files to free up space on your SD card by entering the following command: sudo apt-get clean. Enter. Now your system is updated and ready to use. Remember to go through this process periodically to keep your system up to date. The next thing you should do as part of the initial setup is to set up the localization specifications for your Raspberry Pi. In the toolbar, click on the Raspberry icon, scroll down to Preferences, and then move across and click on Raspberry Pi Configuration. This will bring up a window that will allow you to make configuration changes. Click on the Localization tab. I'm in the Eastern Time Zone of the United States, so I'm going to set up my system accordingly. Of course, you should make the selections that correspond to your location. So first I'll click on Set Locale and enter English as my language and US as my country, and then click OK. Next I'll click on Time Zone and select US as my area and Eastern as my location. Next I'll click on Set Keyboard and select United States as my country and English as my variant. Finally, I'll click on Set Wi-Fi Country and again select the US. After making all my selections, I'll click OK. A pop-up window will tell you that you have to reboot your Raspberry Pi to have the changes take effect and ask if you want to reboot. Click Yes and wait for the reboot. All right, now that your system is up to date, you can start to explore your new desktop. A couple things I like to do right away is set up the look of the desktop. You can do that by going down to Preferences and Appearance Settings, a number of options that you're probably familiar with from using other operating systems, but I'm going to change the background picture. I like, instead of the road, I like the fjord, so I'll click that and keep it. Second thing I like to do is put some of the things I know I'm going to use often onto the desktop. So I know that I'm going to want to use a word processor. Raspbian comes with Libre Office, and Libre Office Writer is the word processor. So I'm going to right-click that and click Add to Desktop. I know that I'll want to use the internet quite a bit, so I will add the Chromium web browser. I have a separate video on the Chromium web browser and how to set it up that you might want to take a look at, but I'll right-click Chromium web browser and add to desktop. I'm also going to use email quite a bit, so I'll go down and click on the clause mail and add that to desktop. And then I use a calculator quite a bit, so I'll go add that to my desktop as well. Now, one of the things I want to show you is that Raspbian also includes quite a few integrated development environments for doing programming, and they're down under the Programming tab. To quickly introduce some of these IDEs, there's Scratch for beginners to programming, which uses event-driven programming with multiple active objects called sprites. There are a couple of integrated development environments for Java, namely BlueJ, as well as Greenfoot, which is focused on graphics and interactivity and is great for beginners. Node-RED is a visual tool for wiring together Internet of Things devices, APIs, and online services. There are a couple of Python IDEs. Python 2 is a legacy, and Python 3 is described as the present and future of the programming language. There's a computer algebra program called Mathematica and a few other IDEs. And finally, Sonic Pi is a live coding environment for synthesizing music and is great fun to play with. Raspbian also includes a number of games, including a version of Minecraft and over a dozen games created with Python. In addition, in order to set up the use of email for the first time, you click on Clause Mail and start to click through, you will have a setup wizard, which will take you through the process of setting up ClausMail. Finally, let's take a look at Libre Office. Libre Office is the word processor that is included with Raspbian, and you'll see that it's a very full-functioned word processor that'll be very familiar to other word processors you've used. If you want to print something from your Raspberry Pi, you'll need to connect your Raspberry Pi to a printer using cups, and I will show you how to do that in a separate video. That concludes our roundup of how to build a full-fledged computer for under $75 using Raspberry Pi 3. I hope you enjoy it.